Okay, in this first video, we're going to be looking at a couple ascending tracts here, sensory tracts. We're going to be looking at the Gracilis and the Cuneatus, two of the more simple ones. I'm sure we all know it fairly well. The other ones, though, we have the lateral spinothalamic, the anterior spinothalamic, the posterior spinocerebellar, the anterior spinocerebellar, and the cuneocerebellar, kind of the oddball out. And I'm just going to put a little N there. Now first we're going to draw our attention to the fact that the Gracilis and the Cuneatus, as well as the lateral and anterior spinothalamic, are the four tracts that actually have 3 neurons within the pathway. Further narrowing it down, the Gracilis and Cuneatus are a little bit special in that they do not have a synapse in the gray matter. As we're drawing it out, we'll see that a little bit clearer, but just remember that that is one of the things that makes them a little bit unique. There's no gray synapse. Okay, so now we go down, looked at Dr. Torgerud's notes here, and we're going to start from the very edge. And if you want, you can follow along. It's on page 70. There's one thing I learned in Bible class in church is that you better flip to the right page when they tell you to read a verse. Otherwise you get a rod to your hand. No, I'm just kidding, you don't. But don't look for scars. No, actually don't. That's why they use newspapers. Okay, no, so while I'm going through this, you can follow along. I find it a lot easier if you just follow along in your pages, flip to it, whatever. First, when we look in the little cross section here, the Gracilis is going to be right here. We just talked about that in anatomy. Gracilis meaning slender. I like to think of it as longer because the Gracilis is a pretty long chain. Remember, first, separating them, roughly the T6 level. So the Gracilis is coming down here. It's got its cell body on the outside. It's ipsilateral, so it continues going up. And then right here, there's a little synapse. And that is the Gracilis, nucleus gracilis. Now from there, there's our second neuron, and it crosses over. And it crosses over as an internal arcuate fiber. And that's right here. Now it just keeps going up until it gets to the thalamus, where there's a synapse. But remember, this portion right here is called the medial lemniscus, not to be confused with the lateral, which we just talked about today or yesterday in our CNS class. So we got the medial lemniscus there. Once it gets to the thalamus, it has a little synapse. And then we've got the third neuron in the pathway heading up to the motor cortex. Or I'm sorry, to the postcentral gyrus, the cerebral cortex. And that's the pathway for the Gracilis. It's everything below T6 is the Gracilis. Like Dan says, Gracilis sounds like grass on your feet. That's where the sensory is coming in from. Next, we've got the Cuneatus. We're going to use a slightly different shade here. Cuneatus is anything coming in above the T6. Cell body still on the outside. No synapse in the gray matter. Remember, that's one of the things that makes it unique. Then right there, we've got a little synapse at the nucleus cuneatus. Not sure if I spelled that right. Then we got a quick crossover. The internal arcuate fiber. Same thing with the cuneatus. Continues up. It's bundled along with the Gracilis and the medial lemniscus. Comes up to the thalamus. The VPL of the thalamus, to be precise. We should have said that before. The VPL of the thalamus. Then the third neuron goes from the thalamus up to the postcentral gyrus, and that's our tract. Remember, both the Gracilis and the Cuneatus do the same thing. They take the same sensory information. Both of them deal with kinesthetic input, They both deal with vibratory sensation, and they both deal with 2-point touch discrimination. So go ahead, what I did was take a picture, scan it, put it on my computer, but you can put it on your tablet or whatever you have, and then you can draw right on it. This is using OneNote. I think you can get OneNote for any program. It doesn't have to be in Microsoft or anything like that. I think they have it for iPad. So that's how I did it, because then you can draw it out as many times as you want. Another thing I should point out in here, the Gracilis, the tract, what is considered the tract is the first one, this first nucleus, or this first branch here, the first neuron. That's the tract of the Gracilis. Same thing for the cuneatus. The first neuron is considered the tract. The whole thing, start to finish, is a pathway. And that's those two very simple tracks or pathways that deal with sensory information.